Okay, Nate, you set?
All set.
All right, go for it.
God is to me the great unknown. I believe in him, but I find him not. Do a little pop quiz here and ask, who said that quotation? If it was the French deist satirist Voltaire, this could quickly become a sermon out of Psalm 19, about how the heavens declare the glory of God. The earth shows the work of his hands, as Voltaire believed that God was a watchmaker who set the world in motion and then stepped away. If it was George Harrison who said these words, the founding member of the Beatles, introduced his buddies to LSD and Hindu philosophy, and consequently was responsible for songs like We All Live and Yellow Submarine, the sermon could very easily land somewhere around Deuteronomy 6. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh alone. You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Those words weren't written by George Harrison, and those words weren't written by Voltaire. God is to me the great unknown. I believe in him, but I find him not. Those words were written in a hut in Burma by a man who spent most of his days staring into a freshly dug, empty grave, where he spent his days contemplating what it would be like once he filled that grave with his own body. This man spent 40 days wandering around the jungle in tiger-infested plains, hoping that he would be eaten. He dispossessed every penny that he owned. He renounced his honorary doctorate, and he burned every letter that he had ever received that said anything positive about the work he was doing. And the man was Adoniram Judson, the first missionary ever sent out from the United States of America to go reach those who had never heard the gospel. God is to me the great unknown. I believe in him, but I find him not. He penned those words after his first and second son died, after his wife died, and then his little girl died. And Judson couldn't take it anymore. Open with me to Job. Job chapter 3. Job chapter 3, verse 20. Job 3:20. Job cries out, "Why is light given to one burdened with grief, and life to those whose existence is bitter, who wait for death, but it does not come, and search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with much joy and are glad when they reach the grave? Why is life given to a man whose path is hidden, whom God has hedged in? I sigh when food is put before me, and my groans pour out like water. For the thing I feared has overtaken me, and what I dreaded has happened to me. I cannot relax or be still. I have no rest, for trouble comes." Today, I want to make 5 points. 5 points that are going to give us a kind of grid through which to contemplate circumstantial suffering. So 5 points to give us a grid through which to think of circumstantial suffering. One of these points is going to be behind the text, 2 will be directly from the text, and a couple will be out in front of the text, but all serve to give us that grid. So first, Job suffers because he is righteous. Job suffers because he is righteous. In chapter 1, verse 8, God declares to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil." That is God's description of Job. There is no one like this man. And after Job had done his best to destroy, after Satan had done his best to destroy Job, God again says to Satan, he retains his integrity even though you incited me against him to destroy without cause. Now there is a kind of evil that falls upon us because of our wickedness, true? We see that, especially with Pharaoh in the book of Exodus. God says to Pharaoh, by now I could have stretched out my hand and struck you, and you would have been obliterated from the earth. However, I have let you live for this purpose, to show you my power and to make known my name in all the earth. You still act arrogantly. But God is not propping Job up to take punch after punch to display his glory. Instead, Satan has selected Job specifically because Job was a righteous man. Job is quite simply the best of us. There was no one on earth more righteous than he. And that is why he suffers. And this is a lesson that is wise for you, and a lesson that is wise for me to heed. If we are righteous, we will suffer in ways that we would not if we were not righteous. Second, we see that great calamity will often shake even the best of us. Great calamity will shake often even the best of us. Verses 25 and 26 are the linchpin of Job's argument here. These are the causality statements behind the rest of the passage that we read. So look at 25 with me. For the thing I feared has overtaken me, and what I dreaded has happened to me. I cannot relax or be still. I have no rest, for trouble comes. What Job specifically had feared had overtaken him. His children were dead. He is destitute. And all he is left with is his wife, who is not exactly the greatest encourager on earth. All of this is taken in a violent, satanically fueled cataclysm. Buried deep down, you and I know that there are things that if they happen to us, we don't know if we could take it. We just don't know if we could take it. Could involve your spouse, your kids, maybe never getting married, maybe the apostasy of a much-loved mentor. Job is the best of us, and we see him shaken to his core over the suffering that he faces. John Owen had 10 of his 11 children die in infancy. Spurgeon was expelled from his denomination. Edwards was kicked out of his church. Billy Graham had his mentor abandon the faith. For those of us in this room, the things that we fear most will happen to some of us. 3, grief and theological accuracy are not often found together. Grief and theological accuracy are not often found together. Have you ever noticed that when people read the book of Job, they stop at Job 2, pick up a little bit of what God says, and then immediately jump to the last chapter where Job gets his stuff back? That's only like 15% of the book. And the other percentage of the book is Job declaring things that are not true. Right? Job chapter 2. God gives and takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job chapter 3. I wish I'd been stillborn. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, so now I'm searching for death like treasure. We really don't read that section. But it is as inspired and as true of Job's thinking as Job 2. There is no light in Job chapter 3. Zero whatsoever. The dust settles. Job is left sitting in an ash heap, scraping himself with broken pottery, trying to get away from pain, because that feels better than the sores that are broken out on him. Grief has overwhelmed his mind. He speaks from loss and from despair, and he's wrong. Job is wrong. And we cannot forget that when we read Job 2. Matthew Henry says, grace teaches us in the midst of life's greatest comforts to be willing to die, and in the midst of its greatest crosses, to be willing to live. And that is what Job did not remember. Job starts out well, but he turns inward. And Job, like the rest of us, falls to pieces. Point number 4. The antidote to Job's grief is a doctrine that is harsh in the moment. The antidote to Job's grief is a doctrine that is harsh in the moment. So here's the points we're starting to get after the text, right? God's first words to Job are brutal. You know what they are? Job 38, 1 and 2. Who is this who obscures my counsel with ignorant words? Get ready to answer me like a man when I question you. You will inform me. That is the very first thing that Job hears from God when God shows up. And after 4 chapters of getting just savaged by God's question after question after question, all Job has to say is, I know that you can do anything, and no plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this who conceals my counsel with ignorance? Surely I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. Therefore I take back my words and repent in dust and ashes. Throughout those 4 chapters, God never addresses a single complaint that Job has. He never does. And yet, by the end of the book, we see that this somehow cures Job. How is that the case? How is it that God can answer none of Job's charges, and yet that fixes Job in the end? It's because rather than address Job's question by question, God reminds Job of who God is. It is only our picture of God that will serve as an anchor when those things we fear come upon us, and nothing will. It is not a discussion of deponent verbs and their nature that will provide us any amount of relief. It is our understanding of who the Lord Almighty is. When our greatest fears befall us, we must do what Job did not do, what Job forgot. Point number 5. God's sovereignty and goodness sustained Christ, and that can sustain us. God's sovereignty and goodness sustained Christ and can sustain us. Mark 14, 32 through 36. Turn with me there. Mark 14. Mark 14, 32 through 36. Then they came to a place named Gethsemane, and he told his disciples, sit here while I pray. He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and horrified. Then he said to them, my soul is swallowed up in sorrow to the point of death. Remain here and stay awake. Then he went a little farther, fell to the ground, and began to pray that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. I hope, brothers, that we do not undersell the agony of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. Do you see the words that are in these verses? He began to be deeply distressed and horrified. He said to them, my soul is swallowed up in sorrow to the point of death. Unlike Job, who did not know the finality of what was happening, Christ did. Christ knew the greatest horror that would come upon him. And it was not the betrayal of Judas. And it was not the railroad spikes driven through his extremities. The greatest grief that came upon Christ was the full wrath of God. And he knew it was coming. And what does Jesus cry out for in the midst of this? He prays, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Christ did not fall because he resolutely trusted that the Father was in absolute sovereign control of the situation. The Father's will had laid out every brick on the path that Christ was going to walk. this is not the top of the tree fruit. This is the fruit that hangs at the extreme bottom of the tree, is it not? God is in control, and he is for you. Both Job and Christ uttered the same phrase, all things are possible for you. Job had to go through 35 chapters of misery before God came and said, I am in control, and I am for you. Christ provides us that example of looking to the Father when those great griefs come upon us, resting in him, and experiencing the confidence and the joy that he gives us through the Spirit, even in the midst of the griefs that we fear will fall upon us. Thank you.